Greetings. This is a pivotal moment in history. It's time for awakening. Nearly every ancient culture around the world left us a message in some form about this time, and now we're living it. The Mayan long count calendar tells us December 21st, 2012 is the end of an age and the beginning of an age. The Temple of Inscriptions at Palenque confirms the date. The I Ching, as decoded by Terence McKenna, reveals that we're approaching a singularity of novelty, such that we will recognize less and less until we reach a point where everything is new and unfamiliar to us. The Hopis say the fourth world is transitioning to the fifth world. They say this era ends in destruction and a new world is created. The Hopi prophecy is that there will be a 12-year purification period leading up to 2012, when the earth will purge itself. And there will be a great purification at the start of the fifth world. The Zulus call this the year of the Red Bull, the end of the sixth world. According to legend, this sixth world is a challenging one, full of ignorance, pain, suffering, hunger, war, strife. Because the Earth Mother created this world in a state of deep depression and sorrow. This time of pain and suffering is to last around 2,000 years, until 2012. After this 2,000-year period, the sixth world is destroyed, and the seventh world is established. The seventh world is to be a perfect Earth, where pain and suffering will be unknown, and man will live in a time of bliss and harmony. The Peruvians have a similar ancient story of destruction and rebirth. The Egyptians encoded the event in the labyrinth at Huara. The Toltecs and the Aztecs call it the return of Quetzalcoatl. The Maoris say that in this time the curtain will fall, the veil will be lifted, and we will see things for what they truly are. This is the definition of the word apocalypse. It doesn't mean devastation. It means the lifting of the veil, the revelation. So why am I telling you all this, and what has it got to do with right to travel? Well, it would seem foolish to ignore the wisdom of nearly every ancient culture on the planet, and these are certainly interesting times. On the one hand, conscious awareness is rising toward a tipping point of enlightenment, while on the other hand, our global economy and governance are in a climax run, and the ruling class is in a mad grab for wealth and control. It appears we're in the final throes of the 2,000 years of ignorance, war, and strife the ancient Zulus predicted. The history of the past 2,000 years or more is really a history of unsustainable insanity. And now we're approaching the end of it, one way or another. Either we destroy ourselves by what we've created while we were asleep, or we wake up. As we awaken, the first thing we need to know is our rights. We have to know what we can do in order to do what we can do. Freedom of movement is one of the most fundamental rights of natural law. It's a perfect study specimen for rights because it butts up against the statutes right in front of our noses every day. And learning to stand on a God-given right, despite the codified legalese that would seek to quash it, raises nearly every question of law. It forces us to really understand who we are and what we're capable of. Then when we apply that understanding to the knowledge that we're all one, we move us all along the path of enlightenment. We don't recommend that you do or don't practice anything you learn in this course on the roads. That's up to you to determine. But learn this subject and own it, and you'll take one giant step out of fear and into freedom. Thanks for joining us. My name is Christian. PJ is your other host, and Michael is our webmaster. Welcome to GTEN's first installment of Right to Travel.
That was very well said. Thank you.
Thank you.
Welcome all. Thank you for joining us. It's a pleasure to have you. We have a great group this evening, fair amount of numbers, and we hope to grow that. One beautiful, beautiful opening here, and we're going to jump right into it.
First of all, if you have a question, you can ask it at any time during this webinar by clicking on the hand raise button over to the right of your screen. That'll put you in a queue. Michael will see that your hand is raised and unmute you to take the question. That's the preferred way. If you don't have a microphone set up, please get one for next time. But you can type in a question and we will read it aloud and then answer it. And we'll take the questions as we go, so feel free to ask any time. We'll answer them when we see them. Please keep your questions related to the material and relevant to everyone, whenever possible. If you have personal questions about, or your own stories, that's fine too. Your own experiences of traveling, that's great. We encourage that. But if you have some very, very specific situation, it might be best kept to private. That's up to you.
Yeah, most definitely. And through this entire series, please be sure to speak up and share it, because the group wants to hear. And this is kind of a exercise for all of us to get a true understanding of the interpretation of law. And everyone's interpretation of law is going to be a little bit different. So the more that we share, the better, well-rounded, established understanding that we can set ourselves up upon, the better off we are. Without further ado.
Yeah, we encourage your participation.
So the language of law versus the code. A simple, beautiful introduction to understanding a bit of our rights and distinguishing terms of law, meaning case law precedents and maxims, things of that nature, versus the code, the Department of Motor Vehicle Code, the codes that California State recommends that you work under, regulations of the road, things of that. So, to start us off, in religion and politics, people's beliefs and convictions are in almost every case gotten at second hand and without examination from authorities who have not themselves examined the questions at issue, but have taken them at second hand from other non-examiners whose opinions about them were not worth a brass farthing. It's Mark Twain that said that. So it's a real good.
I love that quote. It's so true.
It's extremely relevant in that most of us, when I was 16, I took it upon myself to, of course, read the driver's manual, but I also went mostly on what my parents taught me. When my family was in the car, they were teaching me certain things. When I was going to apply for my license. And those traditions or those different bits of knowledge were passed on from their family. And none of us really question the status quo at any given time, because everybody's doing it. Everybody pays taxes. Everybody has a job. Everybody fills out a W-2. Everybody gets a license. Everybody gets registration. Everybody gets insurance. There's no exception. Well, why would there be a question if there was no exception? When we start examining these things, we realize that these are privileges. These are things that are granted to us in exchange for the subrogation of certain rights. And that's what we're really going to be covering today, is taking a look, helping us to distinguish certain words that are being used, and starting to distinguish what is our natural right and what have we consented to that we aren't 100% conscious of. And that's what we're trying to do, is become conscious of this and understand our rights from there further.
Yeah, what invisible contracts have we slipped into without even knowing it?
Without our knowledge. We feel free when we escape, even if it be but from the frying pan to the fire. And what comes up for me when I read this is the term exemption. Something that you are exempt from indicates that you've already agreed to a certain term or condition in a contract, and you're being granted the privilege of being exempt from it. Frying pan to the fire, so to speak.
With travel, the right to travel, you might feel a little fire when you hop out of the frying pan from time to time, but at least we're talking about arguing over infractions here for the most part. It's a great the right to travel is a great place to study your natural rights because the stakes aren't really all that high. I mean, what's the worst they can do, right? So It's kind of a safe environment to potentially flip out of the frying pan into the fire, and that makes it a great way to study your rights.
I like saying that there's a certain limited amount of liability that takes place in exercising certain rights on the road.
It's not like you're playing with what could be, called a felony or something like that under the code. It's you're talking about infractions here, and so if you do choose to examine your rights through right to travel, the fire's not that hot. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, we have some distinctions between unalienable and inalienable. Now, you may think those are very, very similar, and in several cases of certain definitions, you may find them to be very similar. It's important that we understand the distinction of these terms from the time that they were being used. So, for example, these two definitions are from Bouvier's 1856 edition. If I could read. Unalienable, incapable of being transferred. Things which are not in commerce, as public roads, are in their nature unalienable. Some things are unalienable in consequence of particular provisions of the law forbidding their sale or transfer, as pensions granted by the government. The natural rights of life and liberty are unalienable. Okay. Inalienable. A word denoting the condition of those things, the property in which cannot be lawfully transferred from one person to another. Public highways and rivers are inalienable. There are also many rights which are inalienable, as the rights of liberty or speech. Once again, those are Bouvier's. So now those seem to be very similar, but as you can tell, they're both distinguishing points.
Well, I don't know if it's immediately obvious. Okay, so
Not immediately
they look like about the same definition, and in fact, if you look at Black's Law or something more current, you might even see unalienable says inalienable. But let's look at it. Both of them have alien in it, so unable to be alienated. Both of them have lien and alien in them, so they cannot be aliened. But the U and the I makes what difference? And that I submit that the difference is that while unalienable is incapable of being transferred, I mean, those rights are yours to keep, period. Nobody can take them away, and you can't give them away because they're incapable of being transferred. Inalienable does not preclude the possibility that you could consent to give your rights away. You could voluntarily give them up. They cannot be lawfully transferred from one person to another, but they could be alienated. You could volunteer them away, whereas unalienable rights, you cannot volunteer them away.
So it may not lawfully be transferred, but it can be consented, is what you're saying to some extent. And that's kind of what I see from it, is lawfully transferred, whereas unalienable is incapable. It cannot lawfully be transferred. So we were just talking about exemption. We're talking about grants, privileges. We're talking about adhesion and unilateral contracts with which we're not even privy to.
Where these crop up in history is very important. When the founding fathers of our nation penned the Declaration of Independence, and they were looking to escape benefits and privileges of the crown and stand on their unalienable rights, the term used was unalienable. However, when the United States later was looking to control a population, somehow that turned into inalienable. I guess it's more interesting to people trying to stand on their rights to use unalienable, and it's more interesting to governments trying to control the population to use the word inalienable.
But there was two different
Funny
mindsets.
how that works.
There was two different mindsets that were taking place at that time, right? Your declaration was a declaration of independence, of declaring that unalienable rights exist. Whereas the Constitution was forming that we can pledge these rights as a public trust for the benefit of the public and form our own more perfect union, thereby declaring that you have inalienable rights, whereby the rights that you have can be consented and given, granted and pledged to some extent. So I kind of see it, I submit, as you would say, to see it that way.
What's interesting where these play into right to travel is that you can stand on either. We're gonna show you in the course of these 4 webinars that either one is where your right to mobility, your freedom of movement, your personal liberty lies. So you can stand on natural law, which is what unalienable rights refer to. That's natural law, that's divine law. Or you can stand on inalienable rights, which basically means you're standing on the Constitution. And you can do either when it comes to the right to travel.
There's plenty of Supreme Court case precedents law that you can stand on.
Right. The homework, the specifically the brief in support of dismissal, is all about inalienable rights. Those are it's all about standing on the rights protected by the Constitution, which is not unalienable, because the Constitution does not protect your unalienable rights. Your unalienable rights are yours anyway, if you know how to exercise those rights. But the Constitution defines what rights are inalienable, and so all of that case law, you'll see the word inalienable through there, but you will not see the word unalienable, because it's not pertaining to that.
Right. So in contrast to rights, we have liberties. Liberty is often granted by way of consent, by way of contract.
There's actually 2 ways to look at the word liberty, okay? And one is liberty meaning freedom, okay? And it's often used in that sense. What we're talking about here is liberties in more the nautical sense of the word. The word comes from the ship, where in maritime settings, the sailors did not have freedom. Once they signed on to the ship, they only had liberty, which is shore leave. So when they were off of work and they were free on the shore, they were only as free as the will of the captain. Okay, and if the captain decided to set sail, he would yank their leash and they were due back on ship to leave that port, and if they didn't, then they were AWOL. So those who signed on to the ship reduced their rights by giving a certain amount of their rights to the captain. That's what goes on in every country. You need to have a way to be governed, right?
Yes, we have civil liberty. The liberty of a member of society. So that's an important point right there. Being a man's natural liberty, so far restrained by human laws and no further, as is necessary and expedient for the general advantage of the public. So when we talk about the public, we talk about the public trust, we talk about what's been created on behalf of the public, and what is being pledged to the public, and what you are receiving from the public. The liberty of a member of society, being a man's natural liberty, so far restrained by human laws as is necessary and expedient for the general advantage, the advantage of the public. The power of doing whatever the laws permit. So that's pretty clear right there.
Except it begs the question of natural liberty, so why don't we define that next?
And we have natural liberty.
The power of acting as one thinks fit, without any restraint or control, unless by the law of nature.
Now this reminds me of do as thou wilt shall be the whole of the law.
Absolutely.
Absolutely, right?
Yeah, Crowley's all about that.
Yeah.
Of course, it leads to potential anarchy, at least as far as any governments are concerned.
Well, there has to be a form of ethics and morals, a standard, a data integrity board, so to speak, of ethics and morals.
The right which nature gives to all mankind of disposing of their persons and property after the manner they judge most consistent with their happiness, on condition of their acting within the limits of the law of nature, and so as to not interfere with an equal exercise of the same rights by other men.
Very nice. And so I just wanted to point out the difference between this one and that. We talked about the laws, what the laws allow up above in our civil liberty, the laws of the advantage of the public, right, the public trust, whereas this is within only the limits of the law of nature. So we can see that there's a big, broad distinction between those forms of liberty.
Right, civil liberty was defined as natural liberty less those liberties taken away by the laws of the civilization of the community, right?
Yeah.
So it's a as you see with rights and liberties, it's a process of shaving some rights off of unalienable rights to make inalienable rights, some rights off of that to make liberties, and then the different types of liberty, you're shaving off more and more of your liberties. So each of these it forms a hierarchy of when put together of operational parameters, and the question is, where are you operating?
Okay, great. That's great. Well said. Yeah. So we have underneath of natural liberty, we have personal liberty. Okay, the right of power of locomotion. And I behest that all of you look up the term locomotion. It's a great term. The right or power of locomotion, of changing situation or moving one's person to whatsoever place one's own inclination may direct, without imprisonment or restraint, unless by due course of law. No,
And due course of law is due process, so we're going to get into that too, what it is that could actually affect your personal liberty.
what we have next, I believe, is privilege here. This is Black's fourth. A particular and peculiar benefit or advantage enjoyed by a person, company, or class beyond the common advantages of other citizens. When I think of class, I think of stock class. I think of classes of stock. An exceptional or extraordinary power or exemption, as we've been talking about. It's an exemption. A privilege is an exemption, or exemption is a privilege. A right, power, franchise, or immunity held by a person or class against or beyond the course of law. So what we're talking about is an established law of the people, and you have a right, power, franchise, or immunity, an immunity held by a person or class. It's classified against or beyond the course of law, meaning we're back to do it as thou wilt shall be the whole of the law, but the privilege, once consented to in a contract, or once you consent to a contract or certain privileges, you are bound by that contract and only given those privileges to use, to have a right or power against or beyond the course of law, a privilege.
You have an unalienable right to travel, and yet in this society it's converted to a privilege. How does that happen if it has to be against or beyond the course of law? So it would have to be treated as if it were an inalienable right, consented away, so
Or
that you
subrogated would be a good word to use.
right. So, you need to get to a state where you don't have it's against the law to drive or to travel, right? It's against the law to drive. Let's use that term. We'll talk more about the difference later, but it's against the law to drive without a driver's license and registration and insurance. That's what the code says. If you want an extraordinary power or exemption, you can get a driver's license to achieve this exemption from the baseline law, right? So if you're 5, it's against the law for you to drive. But when you turn 16, you can obtain a driver's license, which makes it legal for you to drive. But where did our rights go? At some point, at least those who crafted the code or enforced it on the roadways or in the courts, it must be believed you voluntarily consented your rights away because they couldn't have been transferred without your consent, right? Even an inalienable right.
Yeah, my parents told me to do this, and like, I have a social security card that they require. I mean, I'm already part of society, right? I have the social, I have the birth certificate. All of these things allow privileges by way of consent. So if I didn't have knowledge of that, well, where do I stand then?
Right. Mark Twain was right. You have what you know from people whose opinions were passed down by other people who didn't examine them, and what you get left with is an opinion not worth a brass farthing.
And so it's kind of like it's like the trickle down effect, We've already been placed in these contracts in the license where we even given due process of law to say, hey, well, you have a natural right to travel and do as you wish, and it's well established in Supreme Court, but we'd like you to become a part of this. Like we weren't in any way acknowledged that we were giving up a right. And so far we've yet to even establish that a true right exists. Right? I mean, none of us have been given that information.
Right. Did you get notice, and did you give consent? Because those are the two essential elements of due process of law.
Notice.
When you were told to get a driver's license, I was on the DMV site for several different states a couple days ago, just seeing what's up with the State Department motor vehicles, and they'll all be happy to tell you that you must have a driver's license, and it must be from their state if you're going to be there more than 30 days. Nowhere on there, shockingly, does it say that I'm going to be giving up an inalienable or unalienable right to acquire that driver's license. So I didn't get notice on any of those websites, and I don't remember getting notice when I got my driver's license back, when I was 16. And I certainly don't consent today. We have a question. Alan asks, isn't a driver's license an adhesion contract where depriving human rights is not disclosed? Therefore, a driver's license is a fraudulent instrument where the state is making money on the fees.
If you want, you're welcome to make that argument.
Uh, you know, you could, and you could probably support that argument very well. I don't know. I don't know what the point would be. I mean, you're sort of turning the blame around to the state, right? And taking an aggressive stance on it. Whereas, we assigned the brief, the legal brief that we did for homework because really it's not on the attack. Really, all it's saying, at least my interpretation of most of it. I guess there are a few things that are on the attack in there, but for the most part, it's just saying, your claim is all fine and dandy, but I never got notice of giving up my rights, and I do not consent. And there's plenty of case law showing that I have a right to travel. It is an adhesion contract, the driver's license. It is depriving rights.
Wait, just a moment, just a moment. I'd like to comment on that point, and I hate to
Sure.
cut you off. I believe that it is not a deprivation of rights. I believe that a deprivation of rights is something that is enforced without your will. And I believe that it may in fact be an adhesion contract, but it is more so a consensual contract. We believe that it is an adhesion, or we believe that it is a mandatory contract because of traditional values and because of what society deems. And we go back to our statement with Mark Twain. You consented. I consented to have a license in the state of wherever. And I've had different licenses in different states, and every time I've consented to do it. There's no deprivation of rights whatsoever. I consented and acquiesced to what that contract was. The only difference is that when I was giving away rights, I was not knowledgeable of it. I was not acknowledged that I was consenting to give that as consideration for the contract. So I don't believe that it's a deprivation of rights. I believe that it's my own foolish fault for not paying close attention to the fact that I should have known from the get-go that there are inalienable and unalienable rights, and one of those incurs the right to travel, and that I don't need to quote unquote drive or have a license or any of those items to get where I'm going. So I believe that I acquiesced to those things. That's just my opinion, and that's why I said that you can present that argument, but I don't believe that that argument is very strong, because I believe that it's all based on what we know. It's based on our knowledge, and what we don't know is what's putting us in this position. And it's the whole purpose of this series, is for us all to educate ourselves so that we acknowledge that we have placed ourselves where we are. We are our own slaves. We have consented to everything that we're doing. And that's a powerful thing to think about, because if you place something like deprivation of human rights, that's a powerful charge to me, in my eyes. It's just my personal opinion. It's a powerful charge to place on an organization that we as a people created for the benefit of the public at one time, and now feel that we don't need or do need in certain ways. Because ultimately there is a standard. There's a regulation standard, and there's certain actions that we haven't talked about that the DMV or that the license memorializes or represents. It represents a standard of knowledge. It's kind of like a diploma or a certification, but it also represents title, and it also represents the transfer of rights. And these, so we have to distinguish these things as we go, and we'll be expressing them in the future. But as far as deprivation of human rights, I disagree with that, and I have to express myself on that. And I do apologize for interrupting you, Christian.
That's cool. I couldn't agree with you more. I mean, I think it's a little heavy-handed, and I guess I was going there too. Thanks for correcting my statement, but your point's well taken. It's what I was saying too. Is that you don't gain anything by accusing anyone else of depriving you of your human rights. The better solution in my mind is to correct the record and stand on your rights. Okay. So is it a fraudulent instrument? I don't know. Maybe. You could make the case. Maybe. Okay.
Well, we could make the case like Brandon does. Can you what part of that instrument is invalid? You know what I mean? If there is a signature on there, is the signature wrong? Did you not sign to get that license, every 4 years? Because if your signature is in there and it was fraudulent, if it was a fraudulent transaction that you weren't a part of, then I could say definitely. But if you were a part of it and you just failed to acknowledge or to know that you had to be noticed, and that there's the good faith and credit, the actions that take place under the UCC in commercial affairs, all of those things cover good faith and usage and trade and customs, and this is what we talk about with our morals and ethics. And so some of these things create certain standards and ethics, and in private contracts a lot of people don't have any morals or ethics, and unfortunately some of the contracts that we've been adhered to fail to mention certain things that we've forgotten over the years by way of being happy and being content and being convenienced to death. It's a convenience because now I don't have to worry about it. Now everybody on the road's insured. Now everybody on the road, this, that, and another thing. And whatever tradition has been placed in your mind to alleviate, because we're not saying we want to condone either way, with or without a license. We just want to distinguish what is our right, what we have subrogated our rights as, and how they exist with or without our knowledge. And it falls back on that heavy maxim, he who fails to assert his rights has none. There's no deprivation of human rights. We don't have to go and protest when we're the people that can create the legislation to change things. So it's a powerful thing, but it's also idealistic, and it can be argued on any form. And I apologize that I don't have enough. I mean, if you have a speaker open forum, that'd be cool too. But
well, I think the way you said that we subrogated our rights is absolutely correct. The sooner people get that there is no they, that we're all one. There's only we, right? We did it, whether our forefathers did it or we did it ourselves or our parents did it or whatever. Take accountability for it. And WD has a question here that's all about accountability. I'm going to read that one next. is being told the truth of the matter that you must have a driver's license to drive. Notice the word driver's license to drive. That is true. Okay? A lawful reason to expect notice to be given a sovereign that he's giving up something to partake of a privilege?
Not at all.
Right.
Not at all. Does a beneficiary ever have to be known that he's a beneficiary to a trust? No.
Right. Trusts are not required to reveal everything. It's just not the way trust law works, and this is a trust.
And where is the law that demands full disclosure? It sounds like is what he's asking to me. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Where's the standard that demands full disclosure? Well, that used to be, honor. But there's also a well-founded standard that if you are not noticed or if you are not acknowledged, then due process under common law is not taking place, and one may challenge the fact that they were not aware of what they were contracting. So that can upheave and void ab initio any contract in existence if stood on correctly. Did I say that?
Correct.
I said that
Yeah.
right.
Uh-huh. Right. Any misconception, mistake, omission, anything like that in the structure of a trust, if identified later by the grantor, allows the grantor to either reconfigure the trust to meet his new understanding of the facts, okay, or void the trust ab initio. WD follows up with, after all, who is responsible for the decision of a sovereign other than the sovereign himself?
Decision to cut off.
Yep. He decided to make that snip himself. Let's see. Robert had his hand up, but now it doesn't. Okay, Todd has a question. Traveling while conducting commerce within the jurisdiction is driving. Sometimes I'm in commerce and sometimes I'm not. Does one preclude the other? Absolutely not. No. It shouldn't in theory, okay? Now, you may have a problem if you have a driver's license or an expired driver's license even, standing on right to travel at the roadside, okay? Because the cop is going to pull up. We'll get into this more in later on, but the cop is going to pull up the records and see that you have a driver's license, and then there's a presumption of law that he's going to act upon that, that you're operating under that license. Okay, so it's not. Your question is correct in the way I think you were assuming it to be answered, but the issue happens with the presence of that document in the records. Okay, because of the way the code is interpreted by the cops. You could sort that out in court later, I'm pretty sure, but it would be hard to sort it out at roadside.
And we're gonna talk a little bit more about that, not only in this little bit, but in a whole nother series where we're going to talk about the two distinctions of actions that the law enforcement officials are going through. They're going through an act of understanding code and understanding law, but they're also going through their training of enforcement and ensuring safety of the public. So there's always things that need to be considered when standing on a claim of that nature with the confrontation.
Right. There are a lot of considerations. Todd's follow-up questions is whether to present it or not, and or does this apply whether you present it or not. Todd, let's table that question for a couple webinars away. We're going to I think reveal a lot more information or discuss a lot more information on that over time, and it'll come clearer as to how to handle your unique operations, because everyone's going to probably walk away from this with a little different interpretation of what they want to be doing. Okay. Robert has his hand up. Let's unmute him. Hi, Robert.
Hey, how you doing?
Doing well. How are you?
Good. So that brings up an interesting point, all this. So, like, if you give them your name, you've given them jurisdiction right there, even if you have a driver's license or not. Isn't that correct?
I guess
There's a presumption, right?
right. Yeah, the issue is that as soon as you answer anything
Take any
or
orders.
or take any order, then you've given at least, you know, prima facie evidence of jurisdiction, right?
Yeah, but even if you do that, don't you still have these underlying rights?
They cannot be contracted away.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and
But
and I
now what you have is you have an individual that is looking to enforce in their jurisdiction, and now what you have is you have an old-time showdown going on now. Now you have somebody who's there who claims that they have certain rights. You claim you have certain rights. They have certain evidence. You have certain evidence. Now it's going to be up to whichever official or whichever individual is going to present themselves appropriately
now it's just a game of contract, right?
to some extent, but there's no special words that are going to get you in and out of that.
Oh no, I agree. You
Well, I'm
just
sure
have to
you
get
know.
their acquiescence on what's going on, and so you still have these rights, but to stand on them, even after you've given jurisdiction, is going to be quite difficult. Um, but you still have the right to due process, which brings up another question. When they're giving you a ticket, is that really due process? Or when they take away your car and tow it and take you to jail, is that due process? You
No, the
know?
due process the due process had to occur. We'll get more into this, but the due process isn't after they pull you over. Okay, it's not what happens then. The due
Yeah.
process that's missing is that you could not give away your right without notice and consent. So you never got the due process at the time you got your driver's license.
I believe that's the definition under Black's law of.
So it's actually when you get your driver's license.
Well, sure. If they're operating on a presumption that you have previously given up your right willingly, and that you are now a driver, okay, in a vehicle, and everything's under their code, then when was it that you got that notice and gave consent?
That's true. Yeah, you never did.
When was where was the due process of law at the time that your right was alienated?
Huh. Interesting. Okay. That answers a question I have about driver's license for sure.
Yeah, we're gonna look at this more today. We're gonna cover that very thing more today.
I got plenty of stories to go over too. I've racked the walls with this stuff.
Fantastic. Yeah, I mean, I definitely want to hear our member stories. Those who have good ones. You know, we have our own too, so that's great. Let's we're gonna have story time. I think in other webinars we're gonna be
All right,
talking
cool.
about. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Very good. Thanks, Robert.
All right.
Okay.
Dharma.
Dharma. Dharma is that which upholds, supports, or maintains the regulatory order of the universe. It means law or natural law and is a concept of central importance in Indian philosophy and religion. As well as referring to law in the universal or abstract sense, Dharma designates those behaviors considered necessary for the maintenance of the natural order of things. It's such a great concept, and we don't have anything like really. We don't have a word other than Dharma to describe Dharma.
It's true. It's true. And I just want to read this last sentence again. As well as referring to law in the universal or abstract sense, Dharma designates those behaviors considered necessary for the maintenance of the natural order of things. So is that it's kind of like the natural trust.
And it connotes both rights and duty. It's natural law and one's duty to uphold it.
Well, natural duty, right? It's because it's describing and designates those behaviors considered necessary. So it's not just the act of or the whole of natural law, but it's kind of like seeing the forest through the trees, knowing that you are a part of it and that you in every behavior are acting in terms of dharma. It's considered necessary for the maintenance of the natural order of things. It's covering the behavior and it's covering the idea of the law itself. So
it's that which upholds, supports, or maintains the order of the universe. Okay, it's it includes a duty, okay, a sense of duty, and that duty is toward human happiness, not just your own, right? So it's maintenance of the natural order of things by natural law for and in some interpretations of Dharma it's by state laws as well. But the concept is important to get because if you look at Machiavelli and Kant and Plato and all the philosophers, great philosophers of our written record, this has always been a central question. What is the right level of governance, of taxation, of sort of membership to society versus duty to oneself? And where is that balance? And how do we as a people best move forward in a way that is fair and equitable to everyone, that is true to your personal rights and true to the rights of others as well. And the code, I would submit, has us believing, or at least in the Mark Twain kind of way, our understanding of the code, since none of us has actually read it, or at least I'm talking about the average driver's license applicants never read the motor vehicle code, okay, until they get a traffic ticket maybe, but even then probably not. It's passed down from our parents and such in a way that we believe that we have an obligation to pay the licensing fees, to keep up the roads, to observe the code for the safety of others, to we've bought it. We drank the Kool-Aid, okay? And therefore, unless we learn how to operate differently, we're stuck with it. I would say that we're better off if we stick to the concept of Dharma and we figure out through the law and the code what's really true. Let's get beyond what we've been handed and let's look at what's really true. I think we're going to take about a 5-minute break. PJ, do you want to say anything before the break?
No, everything is perfect, man. Thank you so much.
All right, when the music stops, come back to your seats. It'll be about 5 minutes, and we'll get rolling again.